And the studies were mind-blowing because what the doctors said to people and how they said to them and how they described procedures and drugs meant people were out of hospital faster, needed less drugs, felt less pain. It's like really incredible. And so that's one of my things. I'm like, how can we kind of transfer this to animals?
Hi guys, and welcome to the House Call Vet Cafe podcast. I'm Dr. Eve Harrison. I'm a full-time integrative concierge house call veterinarian in Los Angeles, and I help other vets to build their unique mobile practices on their terms. This podcast is for and by house call and mobile veterinarians, so it is meant to give our community a platform to connect, to share our stories, to lift each other up, and to support each other. Most of us work solo as lone wolves, right? So for me, it's been really powerful to be able to physically hear the voices of my colleagues from all over the world and to get a chance to feel that we truly are part of a community of very real other human beings who get it. While you may be alone in that little bubble of your own vehicle when you're on the road seeing patients, I welcome you to join our community by tuning into our own podcast when you're on your way to your next house call. Whether you're a super experienced house call vet with 30 years of experience, you're a brand new prospective house call vet just looking to get started, or you're house call curious, there will be something for you in this podcast. Each episode, you will hear interviews from other mobile veterinarians just like yourself who are doing unique and innovative things, vets who are sharing their stories, their struggles and challenges, and you can also look forward to hearing valuable information and perspectives from specialists and experts outside of our micro niche. And finally, if becoming a house call veterinarian is something that you've been thinking about exploring, or you're looking for some extra support getting your own mobile practice to feel more profitable and sustainable for you, check out the information in the show notes about my course and our above and beyond supportive private community for members only, plus our monthly group coaching sessions within the House Call Vet Academy. You can also check out my free public Facebook group, which is also called the House Call Vet Cafe, the same name as this podcast, and which is a warm and cozy community for mobile vets to support each other in professional and personal development, in creative entrepreneurship, and in friendship. So thank you guys for spending time with me today. Let's dive into the episode.
Hey everyone, we are back with part 2 of our 2-part series with Dr. Caroline Murray. This episode is likewise just as kick-ass as part 1, and I hope you guys love it as much as I did.
On the note of like the sustainability thing, I think there are ways. So I met virtually through an online conference an incredible guy who is Kenyan, like a native Kenyan, and he was working for a charity there. And so that's a big advantage when you have local people there who understand the culture. And the charity that he went into was international, and they did the usual thing of, like coming, giving stuff for free, kind of leaving. And so then people start to expect that. And so what he introduced was like introducing a small fee for, flea worming, that kind of thing. And then the people see the benefit of that in their animal. So then they're used to kind of paying, and not so saying that, then we're going to charge full fees or whatever. But so helping people to help themselves, but also seeing the value and getting a way to sustain the charity. And he like really revolutionized in Kenya, like a big international charity way of working, which I think is really incredible. So having those people on the ground is golden.
That is such gold. Like, I mean, it sounds to me like what he did was he introduced a standard. Like people like, this is what's possible. Like you said, this is the value and this is the way it can be sustained. There was a level of communication rather than like giving the fish or like showing the value of the investment, even if it's a small amount, that this is a worthwhile pursuit. That's really cool.
Yeah. And also they did, I was like, so in a lot of countries, as you know, like Africa and Asia and things, the vets that are from, well, some of them don't even have vet schools. Like Sierra Leone, there's a charity that I kind of help with remote advice. They don't even really have a vet school. And so even Fiji, they had a vet school, and then they decided that all the graduates weren't really trained enough, so they didn't let them work. Just craziness. But it's important to just try and find some kind of level of people. So I think in Kenya, they had paravets or something. So you start training up the locals to do the things that then the other locals can help themselves. And so you're not constantly needing foreign aid. And it might need foreign overseeing, but the model that he came up with was really brilliant. And even just like a small example, for example, with the street dogs, like they're attracted to rubbish, and restaurants throw the rubbish out because they don't have rubbish collection. And so explaining to them like why they need to either take a tip or not do that. So he like really got to the root cultural causes of everything, which it was so fascinating to talk to him. And I think he's a really great role model that we could all learn from.
It's such powerful work, and that he went to the source, and like instead of just keeping them dependent on international aid, he actually empowered them. That's like the best kind of work to me, and I find it so inspiring too. Like, thank you for sharing about this person. I'm feeling very inspired right now. It's really, really cool. And I find it so cool that your work, like as a veterinarian, puts you in proximity to these kinds of issues and individuals doing this kind of work. I think that's really powerful and really, really cool. And I'm sure that it must inform how you practice as a house call vet in your own practice. I mean, you don't have any experience in isolation. Everything informs everything, right? Like our lives are never just completely compartmentalized. So I'm curious, like this is kind of an off the cuff question. Like, is there any way that you can think of that your work there in these sorts of context has informed the way you work as an entrepreneur or as a mobile vet?
I think one thing that's definitely helped, but also from moving from the UK to New Zealand, where there's a lot lower level of facilities and especially a lot of rural places, is I've learned that you can do quite a lot with not very much. And New Zealanders are, there's kind of like a joke here that you can fix anything with duct tape, baler twine, and number 8 wire and some plastic piping, but you actually can. And I think it makes you realize that you don't, I mean, gold standard is great, but it's not around in a lot of places. And if it is around, it's often really expensive and not within the range of what normal people can afford. Because I think one huge difference I found moving from the UK to New Zealand is in England, 80% of animals are insured. So you can refer nearly everything. No one really does general orthopedics anymore because it's all referral. In New Zealand, maybe 10% of animals are insured. So a lot of animals get euthanized for things that could be fixed, but are just not feasibly possible, mainly due to economic. And, you know, the price of referral stuff is really escalating a lot. And some of that is just because of supply and demand. So I think working in these places has also made it really good at like explaining expectations to people and like, you know, of what do they want? Because sometimes we think we know what they want. They want the best standard thing, but actually they just want things to, you know, be manageable or that so the animal and they can cope and not everything's always really fixable. And so I think I really learned to think outside the box and just be really resourceful. Like, what have we got? What are the options? And also really important, what does the owner want and expect? And can we do that? Not just say, this is what we think we should do. Because again, it comes to the talking and communicating.
Man, I so relate to what you're saying. And I personally observed veterinarians from New Zealand to have that quality of that sort of like outside the box thinking and doing what you can with what you have right now. And how that my own international work, I haven't done a whole lot of it, but I spent 3 months in the Cook Islands on Rarotonga.
Amazing.
Yeah, at Esther Honey Foundation, which I don't think quite exists anymore.
No, sadly.
Yeah, you know about them. That place saved veterinary medicine for me, and it tricked me into thinking I wanted to do a surgical residency because everything was surgical there, and I was just like, man, the difference between animals that live and don't live are the veterinarians who are competent in surgery and who know what to do and who can think outside the box and who can work with what they have in an environment that is like literally scarce in funds, scarce in medicine, scarce in supplies, scarce in support staff. And I saw the New Zealand vets. New Zealand is like the closest kind of like major area, I think, to the Cook Islands. And I saw a lot of New Zealand vets just like fucking rocking out of the park and how they cared for these animals. And I was like, I must be a surgeon. The thing is, like, it's so hardcore the opposite of what the gold, like the ivory tower surgery
In the residency.
and specialty in surgery is. It was just like, well, this is not the same thing at all. And it wasn't the same reason I wanted to have those skills. And it was just completely different. But I witnessed exactly what you talked about in that environment from the New Zealand surgeons. And I mean, I think a lot of people who like to work internationally have possessed that sort of understanding that like, we're going to work outside the box. We're going to do what it takes to make the animal okay. We're going to make this work. Okay. Like, we're not here being perfect. We're not here even following any rules, but we're just going to get the thing done. And, for the benefit of the animal and for the team and the overall good. Like, just, I love seeing that, putting the overall good top front and center above rules, above anything else. Like, to me, that spoke to my heart and my core of like my value system. And so I love that you brought that concept in because it's been very powerful for me to witness. And I was in vet school. I was like a year after my first year and I was thinking of dropping out. I went to the Cook Islands and I was like, I'm staying and I'm in Pittsburgh. And I was like, okay, I've got one of those things right, the other not right.
Life is for learning.
But anyway, have you done any work with Esther Honey or been to the Cook Islands?
No, I was very sad because Esther Honey was always on my long to-do list and then it got shut down. I think there was some kind of political things going on. But I was in Fiji last year, just really briefly. So I was fortunate enough to be invited to this incredible wedding that was on a cruise ship. And then I tacked on at the end of that. I went to an island that I discovered they only have a vet there 3 days a month, which was really incredible. And I saw the most wild, crazy medical things I've seen because they have tropical things that we don't really have in New Zealand, like paralytic fish poisoning. Right. So I learned like so much. And there was an incredible vet tech there who was like some kind of superhuman. But I just wanted to, if I may, briefly come back to your thing about the rules. That is, I think, having no rules is almost really liberating in some of these countries because you just need to do what you can do. And so 2 kind of short stories on that. One, when we were in West Africa, we had a baboon that broke its arm, like radius and ulnar, in a really nasty fight. And so then it started getting necrotic. So we were like, okay, we're going to have to we had to amputate from like here downwards. And we didn't have an autoclave. We didn't have a clinic. So we bought a hacksaw, boiled it up, and darted the baboon and got it out and did the surgery on the sterilized table, gave it antibiotics, and it all heals up fine. And, that would be like probably any zoo vets watching this would be completely appalled. But that's what we had to do at the time. And similarly, we had a lot of very young baby chimps that were orphaned because of the logging, because they shoot the parents. And so if we wanted to treat them, we had very good keepers who were local. But there was also kind of like an alpha male. So the keeper used to go in with a big stick and stop the alpha male getting towards us. We would like run in and get hold of the baby that we needed with some help and treat it. And so a few years later, when I went to like a CPD thing at Chester Zoo in the UK, they've got like some big chimps there. And I said to them, oh, so, what happens if you need to, go in there and do something? And they just looked at me in abject horror and said, like, we don't go in there. Like, it's too dangerous. And I thought, oh, probably not a good idea to mention what we did back in the day. But again, it comes down to choices and risk and, making the best of what you have.
Exactly right. This reminds me of 3 things, actually. Like when you were mentioning the saw, I was like, that reminds me of the Civil War in the United States, like wartime MASH units where they're like, well, we got to amputate your leg. That's the only way you're going to live. And it's not going to be with an autoclave and
anesthesia.
Like reminds me of like 1882, I think is the show about post-Civil War United States, like the Oregon Trail. And it's sort of like a follow-up of the show Yellowstone. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it's
I've heard of it.
Really famous. And like the follow-up was even better, the 1880 whatever. Now I can't even remember what the freaking year was, but they like showed an amputation and I was like, oh my God, that's how it used to be. And like at the same time, like you put that and like the experiences of this like baboon, you saved its freaking life by doing just what had to be done. And you juxtapose that with these routinely appalled specialists. It's like, oh, and it's sort of like pearl clutchers of like the veterinary world. That's like, sometimes the world is not black and white. Veterinary medicine is complex. Like sometimes we just have to do what we have to do. And more often than not, it works out. great.
Mm,
And so, I mean, there's a time and a place for specialty medicine and a specialty mindset.
definitely.
Appalled, everything being appalling and shocking. No GP could ever possibly do anything right. And like, oh my God, I'm pissing off some
Especially orthopedic, which I concur with.
yeah.
No idea. Happy to refer anything with a bone.
Same. Even after my residency, same. Do you have a bone for nerve? Yeah, I'm traumatized. No thanks. None of that anymore. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to say was, and what was the other thing I wanted to say? It was, oh my God, this conversation is so juicy. I don't know what I was going to say, but it sounds
Can I
like
say something else while you're thinking of what you were going to say? So again, with the kind of like out of the box ideas, the reason I got really interested in the drone thing is a friend of mine years ago went to Rwanda, and he was saying that he was at the international airport and there was drones just whizzing around between the jets, which is not allowed anywhere else. But these drones for years, Rwanda, and I'm pretty sure other countries as well, have been using these drones to deliver remote medical aid to humans. And I thought, well, surely we can do this for animal. And so I've been talking to people in New Zealand, but we've, again, regulations. In New Zealand, you're only allowed to fly a drone within line of sight, which is kind of obviously quite limiting. And, you know, when Australia and I know US and Canada had a horrific bushfires or even floods or any natural disasters, which we have a lot of in New Zealand, you get pockets of isolated communities and their animals. And there must be a way, I feel, to like get some remote aid to those places. So if anyone out there wants to talk about this, I would love to hear from you. I'm like squeaky wheel in this country.
Love it. I absolutely love it. That's so great. Yeah. So if anyone's out there listening and wants to be involved in a drone project, please reach out to Caroline.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Lau. I'm the founder of O3 Vets. One of the challenges of being a mobile veterinarian is that you have a more limited toolbox to draw from. At O3 Vets, we put a powerful tool into your toolbox by providing ozone therapy equipment designed specifically to help the mobile veterinarian treat those tough cases. Ozone works as a redox molecule to help decrease inflammation and improve cellular communication. This has an incredibly beneficial effect on a variety of conditions, as demonstrated through the hundreds of scientific studies available. If you would like to join thousands of veterinarians who've experienced the power of ozone therapy, you can visit o3vets.com or call us at 517-925-8148. If you mention this ad, you'll get access to our online training course with the purchase of your ozone equipment.
So I guess I have like a totally separate subject. I mean, I guess none of it's completely separate, but it's sort of like a different angle or a different kind of direction to go in at the moment. We've talked together about how passionate you are about self-care, boundaries, and what ties into that is kind of not being stepped on by corporate practice. Like they're connected in certain ways for some of us veterinarians who've experienced things, right? So I mean, this is sort of related. You shared with me that you lost a dear friend and colleague who took her own life. Would you be comfortable kind of telling me about that and what this all means to you and how it might link together? And honestly, if we could say her name to honor her too, I mean, I love that.
There's quite a few, Eve, not just one, sadly. But yeah, so my two best friends from vet school, one of them, her name was Megan Brannigan, a beautiful Irish lady. And the other one was a lady called Sabina Jensen. She was Norwegian and she actually worked in Africa and did a PhD on HIV in primates in the middle of the jungle, both incredible human beings. Both of them really sadly took their life and also very unexpectedly out of the blue. Like none of us saw that coming. And then I've had other experiences similar with people I've known and colleagues. I mean, as you probably know, it's very common in the vet world, but it made me kind of realize that we need to be more aware of how we look after ourselves, how we talk to ourselves. And I only really discovered boundaries years ago, very late on in life. And also, I feel like we need to advocate for ourselves and others as well. And it's really important to kind of work out what, you know, again, related to your values and also beliefs, what you are willing to tolerate and not tolerate. And again, communication is a really big part of that. So, for example, I used to, back in the day, just get put up with stuff, get really seething and angry, and then the pot would boil over and it would all get pretty ugly. But that's one of the many reasons I started doing the NLP. And it really helps me work out, how to communicate in a peaceful, non-conflicting way. And my life was a lot less, it basically gets rid of conflict and teaches you how to be adults and communicate your needs and understand other people and be more empathetic, and also understand where the root of people's behavior comes from, which I think is also really important. Like, when people have a very unexpected dramatic reaction to something, it's not normally about what's actually happening. It's about some kind of trigger from past experiences, and just even being aware of that. Or you don't need to know what that thing is, but just aware that, we all have things that are going on. The corporate thing, I think, is just a really ongoing situation. Personally, I found that they don't really care about people or animals, and it's more about the bottom line, because a lot of them are owned by people who are not really, obviously people need to run businesses and that's their thing. But I feel like in that respect, veterinary has really lost its way, and that's not why I became a vet. But then there are other companies that people are really happy working for. But I think it's become more commonplace now to talk about mental health, and also associated that physical health. Like, I used to think it was perfectly fine to eat chocolate ice cream for dinner on a Friday night because I couldn't really be bothered to pick up a saucepan. But that's not really good for you long term. And, we have a lot of webinars about eating and sleeping well, but I think at the very core of that, you can't do that if you're working in a place with a toxic culture and a very uncivilized workplace. And I think we really need to work on that, even as ourselves or managers and leaders. Having free pizza does not make up for being treated really badly and working 12 hours a day and having no break. And I think that's a thing that we still need to work through. And they're actually doing it in the new vet schools in the UK. And I think New Zealand is really good at that, from what I've heard of the new vets. They're actually teaching communication, psychology, and business, because I feel like if back in the day our employers had learned that, we probably wouldn't all be burnt out and in the situation that a lot of us have been or are in. And now it's becoming more common that it's really okay to talk about mental health. And just because you're seeing a counsellor doesn't mean you're completely crazy. Actually mean you're actually really open to sorting things out. And there is a lot more awareness about that, which I think is really good. And companies now have to offer, I don't know how it's in the States, but in New Zealand, they have to offer employee assistance, which I think is really good. The level of that varies, but just getting it out there, talking about it is a massive thing, and being aware.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I have a lot of things to say. And I know I asked a huge, 5-part question there and address some of those things. And I wanted to, I don't know, I just wanted to take a moment to honor Megan and Savannah, you said was her name?
Savannah, yeah.
I know. Yeah. I just wanted to sit with that and honor those two veterinarians. It's really sad. And thank you for sharing about them, and may their memories be a blessing for all. And I love that experience kind of helped you open your eyes to just what's going on with so many of us. And it's really cool that you turned to NLP. And I wanted to also, just for those who are listening who don't know what NLP is, can I ask you to explain a little bit? What does it stand for? You sort of explained some of the principles, I guess, but
yeah, it stands for neurolinguistic programming, which sounds like a big mouthful. So obviously they've abbreviated it 3 letters. So I found it really interesting because I had some kind of issues that came up, and that I realized that my behavior was kind of interfering with my general life. And so at the basis of everything that we do, life and career, is communication and relationship. And it doesn't really matter how clever you are. If you can't really communicate with people or get on, you're not really going to progress anywhere. And I kind of found that along the way with some other healing modalities. And one of the things it's really good at is getting to the root cause of why you behave like you do. And a lot of that, and it's funny because once you start learning it, then you start analyzing your friends and everyone you meet. A lot of that is related to basically everything that we do, and the way we behave is related to what happened between the ages of when we were born and 7 years old, which is kind of really frightening, but also fascinating as well. And the other thing that's really golden is that I learned from NLP, but also I had a really horrible, prolonged recovery with chronic pain from the back injury, how the actual words and language that you say to yourself and other people and how you say it, like your tone of voice and body language, can literally affect how people always say, we don't always remember what you said, but we remember how you made us feel, that kind of thing. And that's often like a big issue with the communication at work. People have said, I didn't really like the way you said that, even though what you said was actually fact. And so you can actually change like the way you feel and actually change your brain by how we behaved and speak to ourselves and others. And that was really a big game changer for my getting rid of my pain, which sounds really woo-woo, but that's a whole nother like 3-hour topic. But yes, NLP helps you understand how other people function, get to the root causes of your problems, and also really helps you get on with nearly everyone because you can kind of see character and behavior traits and things. And I did some other kind of behavior study as well, like flow and this stuff, and all of those combined. I feel like we should all learn that at vet school because I struggled for years with thinking that clients were the enemy that came with the animals that we needed to treat. Whereas actually they're just an extension of the animals. And it's really important that we know how to get on with them because they're caring for the animals. And that's what we're here to do as well. I find like neurobiology, it's like my new favorite thing, which is like the biology of the brain and how you can actually change things just by the way you speak to yourself and words. And so they're actually kind of off topic, but also I feel like a bit important for animals as well. And I'm trying to speak to the lady. I watched a webinar by a psychologist who works at the University of Sydney, and it was a human webinar, but it was about the importance of communication and language with respect to pain management. And the studies were mind-blowing because what the doctors said to people and how they said to them and how they described procedures and drugs meant people were out of hospital faster, needed less drugs, felt less pain. It's like really incredible. And so that's one of my things. I'm like, how can we kind of transfer this to animals? Like how we explain to humans, obviously like they're not the animals feeling the pain, but it's such an interesting concept because obviously animals feed off human emotion.
I mean, it's super interesting. I mean, you said it may be sort of woo-woo that it sort of helped your pain. And like, it is absolutely not woo. Like we know emotional and physical pain have a real basis in like a physiological mechanism of being interwoven with each other, perception of pain. And we know that like that's very, very real. And like you said, there are many studies kind of validating that, the truth of that. And it is a really interesting question. How do we translate that to animals? And to some extent, it is the body language of the owners, and they're reading almost like the energy and the intention in the room. And the, am I safe or am I not safe? Is that going to
exactly that?
To like, how is that going to impact my perception of pain, like on the brain level, right? So it's absolutely fascinating. And I think, I mean, man, there's so many directions we can go in this conversation. And kind of even just like tying it back to the house call practice model that when an animal's stress is reduced, the client stress reduced, like that's going to also impact the perception of pain. So when we're dealing with like analgesia or like, like pain related conditions like arthritis, which a lot of our house call patients will be in, like there's an inherently emotional component to handling that I think goes unsaid, but I think that there's a pathophysiologic process that is informing their healing process or their perceptions of the sensations and things like that. And thank you for explaining what NLP is. I think that makes perfect sense. And the way we speak to ourselves and our own minds influences everything. And I also think it's interesting that speaking of curriculums, like we don't learn this in school. We don't learn business in school. We don't learn anything about self-care. It's strange. Like actually just this morning, I looked at the curriculum of a animal chiropractic course, like actually not for myself, someone that I may be collaborating with who took this course. And I was like, can I see your curriculum just so I know like what it is, like what did you learn? And the curriculum was a 3-hour lecture. And this was not the only thing of this nature, but there was like a lecture that was called something like Imposter Syndrome, Self-Care, and Surviving as a New Clinician. I'm like, that. And then also someone that I know very well who attended medical school said that they had many courses and lectures of this nature as well as like role play with clients so that they could work on their actual communication and almost like regulating their emotions if a client were to like, not understand or have a adverse reaction. Like this is such important work for clinicians. I mean, I don't know if clinicians is the right word for people who work in the home missions. Do we call them home missions instead of clinicians? You know what I mean? But we don't work in the clinic, we work in the home. We're home missions. But
Great word.
but it's fascinating in veterinary school. And now the continuing education world has more in this vein, but like out of the gate, we should have this information. We're doing such emotional work and such important work, and damn, like, why? Get on it, people.
Agreed. I think the fear-free stuff, kind of addressing that, like with people are constantly amazed, when you bring a puppy in, if you give it food, it doesn't even feel you vaccinating it while it's eating the food. There's lots of really simple things that we can do to alleviate. And similar thing, like they found with babies, when babies are being breastfed, you can do little heel prick blood tests and they don't feel it, which is such simple, incredible stuff. You don't need drugs. You don't need really expensive equipment. So I feel like we're all kind of going back to, like what we used to kind of do innately back in the day. But things have just got really complicated. And I think, with the owners with them is really helpful.
So this conversation has been absolutely marvelously fascinating. And I was like, oh, this might be another like multiple part episode. Like as soon as we started talking, I was like, okay, yeah, we're not going to finish this conversation in 30 minutes.
Sorry. I
No,
feel like we need like 2 hours.
No, this is absolutely wonderful. And so I think at this point, probably we will go ahead and close up the episode. But first, I wanted to check in with you and see, is there anything that you'd like to share with the House Call Vet Community International or not? Anything that you think would be helpful for new house call vets, or really anything else about yourself that you'd like to share?
I think just for new house call vets, like back yourself. I started doing the mobile clinic because I felt like I didn't really have any option. And then I realized how fulfilling it was and how I really loved it. And like, I really enjoy working in that way and connecting with people in that way. And there's never a good time to start. We're reading all the time about, just do it. And I did it with no business knowledge whatsoever, which I wouldn't probably recommend. But sometimes circumstances dictate that you need to do things. And often, even so, when I travel, I just book the first 2 nights and then wing it for 6 weeks. And those are the best travels I've had. I think in the same vein, it's really important to do what you love and follow your passion. And like house call isn't for everyone, but if you feel like that the way that you want to work, just start doing it and develop your network. And I also find it quite empowering because if you're in a mobile vet situation, you don't need to deal with those people, or, you can give them an opportunity to apologize and explain why this behavior is not acceptable, but you don't have to deal with that. You're not being paid to deal with it. And also, I think be really firm with your expectations. So what I do is, I don't know if other people do this, I have like a little intro email that I send to people that clearly states, this is my experience, this is kind of how I work. This is what I strongly believe in, like holistic model of treatment and stuff. Food is medicine. I'm really into environmental modifications and, eco-friendly stuff and ordering things as required. And then also setting their expectations. Like I expect them to turn up to appointments when I'm there because that doesn't always happen. One lady said she was off swimming with her son and just forgot, and I'd have to come back another time and expect not to pay me. Like that's not okay. Pay for the appointments, and also just like, behave in a civilized adult manner and communicate clearly. We're all here for the good of the pets, like us and the owners. So I would just really encourage people to try it. And everyone, like we all have different flavors of how we do it, and we have to adapt to the region and the culture and the circumstances we're in. But I find it really fulfilling. And also, I do still quite like the locuming as well. I know not everyone does both, but you always learn new things and then you can bring them back as well and share knowledge. So I find it really fulfilling. And I think it's really for people who like connecting with people and, just like value relationships and communication. The only other thing I'd just like to say is I would really love to work in Antarctica. So if anyone has some veterinary or other opportunities there, please let me know. And I'm also really passionate about the disaster preparedness stuff, which I'm trying to talk to the local communities about because, everywhere now has natural disasters that you can't really avoid them. See them on the news every week. And it's really important that, personally, we're prepared with our animals and also communities. Like in Australia, they've got a really good kind of bushfire, like network and phone tree and stuff. And even though we've had some quite bad incidents in New Zealand, people are still kind of generally quite complacent because it hasn't been on a really vast scale like what you guys and other continents have. But we've got like a big earthquake predicted in the next 35 years that they're saying is going to cut everyone off and be really catastrophic. So being responsible for yourself, I think, is really important. And also mentally, again, that comes back to the self-care. You can't be resilient in the face of bad things happening, but we can all be civilized and communicate clearly if we know how and learn how. And we're all always learning. So I think that's the other thing with the mobile thing. We don't all know everything. And I feel as that we're really honest and open that if we don't, we will find out or give them other options or refer, which from personal experience in the medical world, I don't always really find. It's kind of an interesting comparison, having had a journey in the health system myself in New Zealand, which has been really involved a lot of suffering. I find it really interesting to compare what we offer as veterinarians. And I think, I'm really glad that I'm a vet. And I think what you were saying about the Esther honey, doing what you love and being strict about your time frames, you're not going to do it 7 days a week, makes you really love your job again. That's what I found, like you did. Finding your people is really important. Find people, you're the sum of the 5 people you surround yourself with. So find people that are supportive and also find your clients that really value you.
Man, I couldn't have said it better. I love everything you just said so much. It's about the boundaries. It's about the communication of those boundaries. It's about finding the clients that are the right match for you, the 5 most people you spend time with, really influence you and vice versa. I think that's so important to consider when we're making these choices in our businesses about who to surround ourselves with as business owners and who to surround ourselves with in terms of our clients, because we will be spending time with them. And, finding our people and our community, to me, that's made all the difference in the world. So I'm so glad that you've had a similar experience. And I also love, love, love how your whole MO as an entrepreneur and a house call practice owner is informed by so many different interdisciplinary trains of thought, like the NLP and the wildlife work and the working internationally and the disaster prevention and relief work and things like that. And I think that is just such a beautiful thing and the absolute makings of such a good entrepreneur and such a good veterinarian to take things from all different parts of, not these blinders that it's so easy to have given how busy we all are as veterinarians and what we didn't learn in vet school, to go outside the box and literally nourish ourselves in order to be a better vet and to be a better entrepreneur and to live in the world in a more healthy and enjoyable way. And I just love how you do that and all of the ingredients that go into the you. I'm just so inspired. I love that. I also want to state that I still have not learned that eating chocolate ice cream for dinner on a Friday night is wrong. That happens to me on the regular. And then also for any vets that are in Antarctica that would like to hire Caroline, please reach out. I'll probably be able to reach her in the show notes. I think we have that information prepared somewhere. And then to close up shop, I wanted to ask if you'd like to place an order in the House Call Vet Cafe. Would you like to order a drink of any kind?
Oh, my 2 favorite drinks are peppermint tea and Bailey. Do you have either of them?
Yes, we have those in stock. In fact, we have them in droves. So excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insights and experience here. And I hope our listeners will find this conversation as inspiring as I did. And until we connect next time.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the House Call Vet Cafe. If you enjoyed this episode, then hit the subscribe or follow button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never have to miss an episode. This podcast is made specifically for you, so don't be shy if you'd like to reach out and let me know your thoughts on this episode. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook as the House Call Vet Academy, where I also share more valuable content. If you're interested in learning more about consulting for House Call Vets or the House Call Vet Academy online course and community, please click on the link in the show notes. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I can't wait for you to join us for our next episode of the House Call Vet Cafe.